Hello, everyone. So sorry for the delay. I was having some issues, but here I am. And I just sent the link to Jackie. So he will be here in a moment. Let's just wait. In the meantime, I can answer any questions you may have if you want us to do some specific content in the future. There's the music. And here's Jackie. Yay. Hey,
Hey, hi.
Jackie.
Yeah, Alex, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
Yeah, okay, cool.
Cool. Yeah. I was just saying that I was late because I had some issues with my Slack. I don't know why I can join. I'm checking that out. How are you? Oh, you're on mute.
Yeah, I'm good. Thank you. How are you?
I'm good. I'm good. Uh, all right. We're getting people. Hello, Gopala. Hello, Praveen. Awesome. All right, so this is not a holiday for me, and I think neither for you.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
here we are. Hello, LinkedIn user. Hello. All right,
Hello.
perfect. Okay, so what are we gonna do today, Jackie?
So today, I will going to talk about functional monitoring. So, I think
Oh, you're on mute again. That's weird.
sorry, I don't know how my okay. So today I will be talking about the functional monitoring. It's a part of Anypoint monitoring, basically. So because I have seen a lot of people is not using that functional monitoring features provided by the MuleSoft. We're going to explore more on the functional monitoring, how to configure the functional monitoring for the public endpoints and for the private endpoints, basically. So yeah, it is an interesting topic, and we will going to have an interesting demo. Yeah, I hope people will like it.
All right, perfect. So I think we can get started because we joined a little bit late.
Yeah, that's fine. Yeah. So let me present my screen. Just let me know once you can see my screen.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah.
I can see it. Cool.
Okay, cool. Yeah. So let's start. So I will just start with my small introduction. So I think my name is Jitendra Bafna, and a lot of people knows me by name Jeki. Yeah. So I am working as a senior solution architect at the EPAM system, and currently I am a MuleSoft ambassador, MuleSoft meetup leaders, and doing a lot of community stuffs. Yeah. From last 2-3 months, I am not that much active in the community due to a lot of work and due to some projects. Yeah. So, but today I got a time to talk about functional monitoring. Basically, yeah, this topic is in my mind from last many days, and so today I got a chance to speak on that functional monitoring. Yeah. Okay. So
Cool.
I prepared two slides that it's very important for this particular to understand the functional monitoring. I know the slide is not no the is generally we don't prepare the slide for this streaming, but I created 2-3 pages so that people can understand a bit better. Yeah.
Yeah,
So
sure.
yeah, so let me start. What is the functional monitoring? So functional monitoring is bit different from any point monitoring. So any point monitoring where you can monitor your API how API is how your API is performing, basically. Like you can get a various metrics like memory uses, CPU uses, how is your connecting behaving. But with functional monitoring, you can monitor your endpoint, basically, right? So you can check the behavior of your endpoint, so whether whether the I am getting the expected payload in my result, basically, right? And also you can do the health checkup of your API, and also you can add a lot of assertion, so you can validate the values in the payload, and you can also validate the values returning back in the response in the header also. So you can add a lot of assertion into the functional monitoring, basically. So basically, functional monitoring allow you to monitor a private endpoint as well as the public endpoint. So public endpoint can monitor using the public location, and whereas the private endpoint can be monitored using the private location. But we can also monitor private endpoint using the public location. So we are going to see these three component in today's session. Okay. Okay. So let me share one slide. So what are the things provided by the functional monitoring? So basically you have endpoints. So you can create a monitor where you can configure the endpoints. So endpoints are nothing. It's a URL of your API. So which you have to like for which you have to perform the health checkup, and also you want to check the functional like how your API is functioning, and if you want to validate the behavior of your API, or if you want to test your API every 15 minutes, every 1 hour, or every day, right? So you can schedule that. Then also it support assertion, so you can validate the response basically like on the basis of status code like payload, or you can add the headers also. It also support the header, so your API might be enabled with some kind of authentication or authorization. So you may have to send a client ID and the client secret, or you may have to send some tokens or something like that, so you can use these headers basically. It also provides some kind of reports basically. So with functional monitoring you can generate the reports like how your API behaving basically. It also provide one more thing like what is the response time of your API, so you can measure the latency of the API also using the functional monitoring. So there are two things. So within the functional monitoring, location and the interval. So location can be a private location, and interval can be basically like it's kind of schedule like where like. So basically you can schedule like I want to monitor this particular API every 5 minutes. I want to like monitor this particular API at 10 minutes. So it support cron expression also. It support fixed frequency. So there are multiple options. So this is diagram I just picked from the MuleSoft documentation. Okay, so let me show. So you can configure a multiple monitors. So this is diagram showing how we can monitor a public endpoint using the public location. So public location is the location which is pre-configured and which is provided by the MuleSoft basically, and these are the shared location basically. Okay, so you can configure a multiple monitor. Each monitor can have a one or more scheduler basically. So you have monitor one, you have monitor two, monitor three, monitor four, monitor five. So with monitor one, I have a one scheduler, and this monitor, like this particular scheduler under the public location one, and right. So in this public location, I will be monitoring API one, API two, API three, API four, and API five. Like that, we have a monitor two. Under this monitor two, I have a two scheduler, schedule B and the schedule C. Under monitor three, I have a two scheduler, schedule B, D, and schedule E. So if you see schedule B and schedule C is monitoring is monitoring the API via public location one. If you see the monitor three have a two scheduler, schedule D and the schedule E. Schedule D is monitoring API via public location one, and it is also monitoring the API via public location two. Okay, so also you can monitor the any API which is available over the public internet or over the www, right? So it's a simple architecture. So there are three public locations currently supported by a MuleSoft. One is US East one, US East two, and there is a one location in the Europe basically, right? So you have a three public location which is pre-configured. Okay. So let me show with the before I move into the private location. We start with some small demonstration. So let me open. I have created already few endpoints. Let me check where is my those endpoints. Yeah. So basically, I have a two application. So one is a public application and one is the private application. So before I move into that, let me go to the architecture part. Let me go to runtime manager first. Okay. So let me search Mule. So I have a two application. They both application deployed in the VPC, right? Anypoint VPC. So one is running on port 8091 and one is running on port 8082 basically, right? So you have a two application, a private app and public app. The public app is running on 8081 and private app is running on 8091. They both are deployed to the same VPC, right? So let me go to the code. What I have done, right? So this is my public app. In this public app I have a four endpoints. So one endpoint just give the health, one endpoint give the employee information, and the third endpoint is calling a private endpoint internally basically, right? And for the health, So, and then we have a one more endpoint, which is calling a employee endpoint, a private employee endpoint, which is running on port 8091, right? So, right. So I will show you in the code. So if you see it here, request. So I'm using the Mule Worker internal Mule Mon private app. So if you see, I have a private app here, right? So I cannot directly call the endpoint of the private endpoint, right? Over the internet. So what I'm doing, I have a public app. So I've exposed my public app on port 8081. They both are in the same VPC. So my public app can call the like private API basically because they both are in the same VPC. Okay. So here you can see I have a endpoint configure, right? So Mule Worker internal, the port 8091. So this is the internal endpoint which I'm calling basically. Okay. So let me show the response of all the endpoints before I move into the anypoint monitoring. So this is I'm directly calling public endpoint. Let me show one by one. Please let me know if any question is there. So this is give me the health okay. Now let me check a second endpoint. Here it is giving me the employee information. Now I have a third endpoint, which will internally calling a private endpoint, which is on VPC. So this is my private endpoint. So internally it is calling this endpoint, and let me go. Let me browse this. So here you can see this is the app type is a private API. And now my fourth endpoint. This is again calling the private endpoint of the employees. Now Now I will directly call the private endpoints basically, right? It should not be browsable because it is running on port 8091 and it will not allow to browsable, right? It is not allowed. Or even I remove the internal part, right? I use, okay, it will be not because like you cannot call API a private endpoint which is running under the VPC, right? So this is the context. So I have a few private endpoint, I have a few public endpoint. I have to monitor everything basically. The first thing what we will do, we will going to monitor a public endpoint using the public locations, right? So for that, what I will do, I will go to the anypoint monitoring. So the first scenario is like monitoring the public endpoint using the public location. So let me go to my monitoring. This is, if you can see, if you go to the anypoint monitoring, you will see something called a functional monitoring. Okay. The first scenario, what we will do, we will going to create one monitor and one scheduler, right? And we will have a public location and it will going to monitor 4 APIs basically. So we will create one monitor, one scheduler, one public location, and that will be monitoring API 1, API 2, API 3, and API 4. Let me do that. So first you have an option called create monitor, right? So you can give a create monitor. So you have to give a monitor name. So simply I can give like mule demo public monitor. Okay. Then here you have, as I mentioned, like we have a three location, but right now we are monitoring just US East 1 and East 2, right? So we are in the US, right? So for it will provide two public location. If you are in Europe, it will show the Europe location, right? So currently my control plane is belongs to US, so it's showing the two public location. I will say US East 1. And when you want to schedule the monitoring, so we have a multiple options, 15 minutes hourly, and if you go to advanced, it allows you to set up the cron expression basically. So you can definitely put the cron expression also, right? So I will just keep every 15 minutes, then I will go to next. Now it's saying a select endpoint. So which are the endpoints you need to monitor? So I have a 4 endpoints basically. I will copy this, then I will put it here, right? I don't have any authentication or anything. You can definitely add a client ID, client secret, if you want to add any custom header, whatever, right? So you can definitely do that. Right now, for me, everything is open. There is a no authentication enabled, so I will not going to set any header. Here I can put the assertion. So I'm expecting my response code equals to 200. My status code must equal to number type 200. You have other options also, like response body. If you want to validate any response header, you can do that. But right now I'm just expecting 200 as a response basically. Let me add a second endpoint. This is my second endpoint, right? So v1 employees. Here again, it's the same thing. It's open. Now I will add a third endpoint, which is internally calling the private API. It will work with a private location, with a public location also, because I am using the endpoint of my public API, right? So I will use this. Okay. So here I am saying HTTP Mule API. Then I will use the fourth endpoint, add endpoint 4. Okay. So I have added all my endpoints and I will simply say next. Here you can set a notifier. So it's like Slack, PagerDuty, New Relic, Sumo Logic, and email. So what kind of notification you want in case if your API is not responding, if there's any error with your API, and if your like API condition is not matching with the assertion, with define assertion basically, I will just use some email ID. Okay, I will say create monitor. Simple. So my monitor is ready here, and when I create first time, it will going to run the monitoring basically, right? So let's it is still running. So once it it completed, right? So you can see the assertion, all the assertions got run. I can click it here. So it will say 200 equals to 200, and whatever for four APIs basically, 200 equals to 200, all for all four API which we have configured, right? So I got a successful response for all the four APIs basically. Now also, if you want to see some kind of report, or you can, if you want to run it again manually, you can just click it here, and you can select the execution location, and I will just say run now. By default we are setting on US East 1, but whenever you are trying to run it manually, you can select the public location, either US East 1 or either US East 2. So again, this is also successful. Now let's see what happens if I try to monitor directly private endpoints. Okay, so let me do that. Before that, I will use this endpoint. So this is www dot endpoints basically. It's a www, like any internet endpoint I need to monitor, which is also possible. Okay, so let me do that. So basically, you can do that. You can just simply say edit. Let me show you. You can just click on these three buttons, like what you can just simply edit monitor, right? And you can add more endpoints if you want to, or you can create a new monitor also. And I will say add endpoint 5. Just paste this, right? And let me add one more, this one also. If you don't want to do the SSL validation also, it's fine, like you can just disable it. Okay, I will say next, update monitor. Okay, just run it again. Let's see, US East 1. I don't know. It got failed. Let's see why. Yeah, it is showing successful everything here. Let me refresh it. No, it is passed, I think. I don't know why it's showing. Yeah, it's everything is green. I don't know why it was showing red. So everything has been passed. So you can see it here. If you want to add more scheduler, you can simply say more scheduler, right? So which in which location you want to add the scheduler, you can add the multiple scheduler, which I have shown in the diagram basically, right? Apart from that, you have an option to download the monitor basically. You can delete the monitor. Here also you can see how is your API performing. What is the response time of your API basically. It will show everything. DNS connect 23 milliseconds, wait time 35 milliseconds. It will show everything. And if you want to see the API response for each and every API, you can see it. It will say this particular API took 51.75 milliseconds. It will show everything to you basically 48.04 milliseconds 50. And apart from that, this particular two APIs took more time, 157.53, 133.81. So that is how you can also cache the latency of your APIs basically. Now let me do one thing. Let's see if I add the private endpoint, right? So what happens? And this is my private endpoint where the application is running on port 1891, right? So I will add endpoint 7. Let me just validate the URL. So I will just remove the internal. So when you are just want to monitor from outside, we don't use the internal. So I will just use mule worker, right? And mule, this is the application name dot region port 8091, which is the http dot private port on the VPC slash v1 slash l. Next, update monitor. Let's run. What happened? Let's. It's. I think one endpoint should fail. Let's see. Any question?
Yes, there's a question. While you try to invoke the worker on the private API from the public one, instead of invoking the internal worker, in that case, it has to fail.
Or can you repeat? It's in chat. The question is in chat.
I I don't know
Okay.
why it's not in chat, but I can see it in LinkedIn.
Okay. So what
let
was the
me
question? Yeah.
let me post it so you can see it. Okay, there you go.
Yeah. I have a quick question. While you try to invoke the worker of the private API from the public one, instead of informing internal, in that case, it has to fail. I have a quick question. While you try to invoke the worker of the private API from the public one, instead of see, you can use the internal worker. That's not an issue, basically, right? So you will come to know. Like, let me finish the demo. I will going to cover everything. Like, let's wait for this question. Basically, you will come to know. Basically, okay. So I'm
Okay,
just finishing the first step. So here you can see this particular and this particular request has been failed basically. I will not call a request. The particular monitor has been failed. So here let me open what has been failed right now. So we will see it. So let me do show all. Here you can see all methods are successful, right? And one of the method for which we haven't got the assertion, you can see this for this particular method I haven't got the assertions basically, right? Because it is failed basically. You can see there is a no assertion has been matched because you cannot monitor a private endpoint from the public location. But we can do that. But I am right now we haven't configured our VPC in that way that we can monitor a private API from public location. Right now it's not possible, but there is a way. I will show that way in the last basically. So now what we have to do for monitoring the private endpoint? So for that we will create a private locations. So I will going to show you. uh, First let me correct this. I don't like failures. Let me remove this particular endpoint. Update monitor. I will copy this. Okay, so I will create another monitor. I will say create monitor, and I will just put it here, and I will say private here. And I don't want to select this location. I will say private location and new create new location, right? So here I can give a private location name. So what name I want? Mule demo. So I can say mule demo private location. And which environment you want a private location? I want in sandbox basically. And what is scheduler basically? So with this what will happen, it will going to set up, it will going to deploy one application in the sandbox which will be consuming zero point 0.2 vcores, right? But there might be people who doesn't want to create a application which can consume zero point 0.2 vcores. Then how we can monitor a private endpoint? So I will show that particular demonstration in the in the end basically. So here right now what will happen, it will going to create one mule application which will consume zero point 0.2 vcores in the runtime manager or in the sandbox basically. So here I have selected the sandbox. Okay, so next, go to next. Now I have to put the endpoints. So let me put some internal endpoints. This one, mule worker. Either you can give a mule worker internal, or it's fine without internal also. Okay, Control V. I'll put my second endpoint. So here I will just give the assertion again with a 200 status code. I'll put endpoint 2. Okay, employees and health. Again, assertion, I will give the status code only. I will say next. Uh, I'm just ignoring this notifier for now. So you can configure any notifier and create monitor. Let me duplicate this. Let me go to runtime manager. Let's see what happens there. Here you can see it is creating a mule demo private location. If you go to settings, it will be creating in the region, same region where is your VPC located, and it will consume minimum of 0.2 vcores is required for this private location. And if you see the file name, it's a API functional monitoring runner.jar. With this particular application, all your private endpoint get monitored, right? Yeah. So it's simple app. Like you can see the region where is your VPC located, right? And it is creating application with 0.2 vcores. So let me show my VPC also. This is my VPC, and this is also, if you see the region, it is US East Oyo only, right? So let me go back to my monitoring, or let's wait till my application get deployed. It takes some time. Hopefully it will be faster. So till that I can show my diagram for public location. Okay, so this is how a public, so if you see the private location which is at the top, now the private location came into the VPC basically. Like you are creating the private location, and it has to be created by you. How many private location you want, that you can create here. Like in this diagram you can see you can create as many monitor you want. You can create as many scheduler you want. You can associate one or more scheduler with each monitor. Then like you can have a scheduler associated with one or more private location, and each private location can monitor one or more APIs basically. And here the only difference between previous diagram and this diagram, in previous diagram, the public location, it at a any point platform level basically, like it's not at a VPC level basically, right? So these public locations are the shared location, like multiple tenants of MuleSoft can share this particular location, and through this location all the public API get monitored. But with this private location basically, you can see this private location is created within your environment, within your Anypoint virtual private cloud. That's the one difference. But the good thing about private location, you can monitor private endpoint, you can monitor public endpoint without doing any configuration. You can monitor any API which is located on public internet, www dot. Yeah. So let me see if my application got deployed or not. Yeah, it's deployed, it started. Let me go back to my monitoring. So it is running on, it is running basically. The first time it will run automatically. Let me run it like, so still, okay, this location is still not available. Let me refresh. Still it is registering. Yeah, because like runtime manager will send the status to functional monitoring. So like while like for updating the status it may take some time, but I can see some response came. Yeah, here you can see, yeah, it's my private monitor. So here you can see my both the endpoint got a successful response. You can see like, so I can easily monitor my private endpoint using the private location. So it took 55 milliseconds and other one took 99.92 milliseconds, right? But let's see if I want to monitor public endpoint with a private location, can it possible? Let's see. Okay. So let me put health endpoint. Let me put one more endpoint, employees. And also put me one www endpoint or endpoint available over the public internet. Okay. So I have total 5 endpoint, which is comprised of private endpoint, public endpoint, and the endpoint which is like public endpoint of the MuleSoft, and the other public endpoint which is available over the internet. I'll just say next and I'll say update monitor. Okay, so let me execute. Here now I can see now my private location. I can say run now. It takes some time because it dispatched to the application like run it, and then we got the response back, then it get updated here.
There's a question in the meantime.
Yeah.
Does it affect the API if it has rate limiting enabled?
Yeah, in that case, like if rate limiting is enabled, right, then you cannot do anything. It will show as a failure basically, right? So if you let consider if you are getting the 429 response, so if you want to like what you can do, if you want to consider 429 as a successful response, right, so you can add the assertion for that basically. I will show you, like apart from it depend on what kind of assertion you have set up. Let me show you. So here you can add like this part, like assertions basically. Again, you can say the if status code must equals to this, and I can say 429. So it will consider 429 as a success code basically. But if you are not adding this endpoint or this code, right, it will consider even it's rate limiting enabled, it will consider. But like what I will say, uh, so basically, generally in the rate limiting, like you have a SLA tires, right? So you can have a one separate SLA tire for this monitoring, basically, right? So you can have a separate client ID and the client secret for this particular API, and that client ID and client secret you can configure here, basically, right? So whenever the request coming from the monitoring, so there will be no rate limiting apply, or you can provide enough request that can be accepted from the monitoring basic that you can do. You can define the SLA tire basically, right? So there are multiple ways. Got it?
Thank you.
Yeah, you can see the it has been passed. So it passed all the private location, it passed all the public location, it passed all the endpoints available over the internets basically. You can see, right? So everything is passed. Now the question should come from people why we have to use 0.2 v codes basically, right? Yeah, we can definitely avoid that. As there might be possibility you might not have a v course and you don't want to use point to v course for the monitoring the private endpoints, but still you want to monitor the private endpoints. Is there any possibility that we can monitor the private endpoint without create a private location? It's possible. How it possible, I will going to show you right now. Before that, let me show you some few things basically here. And also you can see a lot of things here. So you can see the history here. So you can click on history, it will show everything. So for each and every API, what method has been executed. If you open the more detail, it will give a more detail about the API, and it will say what kind of response I get from this particular API. It will show payload and everything basically. It provides a lot of details about so how much time it took for connect, how much time it took for DNS resolution, receive, send, total, and wait time basically. It will show each and every minute detail also for each request basically, and what are the response header, what are the request header we have passed, and what is the endpoint, and how what is the total time taken by this particular endpoint to get the response back. So those kind of details is available. You can download this as a JSON also, right? Which is good. Then in case if any request is failing, you got a proper email which will show everything, like why this particular thing is failing, right? With the proper details, like these are the endpoints has been failed and these are the endpoints has been success basically. So those kind of capability available with the functional monitoring, right? So I will come to the tricky part now. So where like how we can monitor a private endpoint using the public location. I will come on that. Just give me a second. I'm just checking whether you want to. So you can modify your scheduler. If you want to disable your scheduler, you can do it anytime. You can delete the scheduler, right? So and there are a lot of these things available already. Now I will go to. I will share my slide. Okay, so now what you have to do to monitor a private endpoint with a public location. So whenever you have a VPC, right, in VPC you need to allow this IP addresses on the port where your private application is running, right? So let's do it. So what I will do, I will go to my Anypoint VPC, back to monitor. Not here. Let be here. Let me go here. Right, this is my VPC. Right, I can select VPC East. I can go to the firewall. So basically what I have done, so I have a VPC and my application get deployed in this particular VPC, right? US East Toyo. So whenever any application I'm deploying on the sandbox on this particular region, by default it will automatically deploy to the this VPC. And let me go to the firewall rule. So in firewall rule, I will say add new firewall rule. I will select the currently my application is running on port 8091. So what I will do, I will say http.private port, which is the reason for 8091. But here I need to change the source basically. So I need to allow the request from this particular IP address. So this is nothing. This is the IP address of your US East public location. This is the public IP address of your US East public location. Let me copy this. Okay, I will copy. I will paste it here. Let me verify. Yeah, but it required a CIDR mask. So what CIDR mask I should give so it can accept only one IP address basically.
Jackie, you're on mute again. Hello? You're on mute.
Sorry, I don't know how I go on mute sometime in between. So
Yeah.
I think I gone mute on just now, right?
No, a while.
Okay. So let me do one thing. Let me repeat. So what I've done, so I have configured, if you see on Anypoint VPC, right? So I have configured few endpoints, like I allowed this particular IP address, right? So this particular IP address of the public location US East one, and and the other one is the IP address of public location US East 2, right? And I use the http.private port, http.private port 809180 because my application is running on 8091 port. So here you can see these are the three IP addresses you can allow. If you want to use public location US East 1, you use this IP address. US 2, use this IP address. U Central, use this IP address, right? So I have allowed this two IP addresses for now. I am not using the U Central for now. So I allowed these two IP addresses on port 8091, and I use the /32 mask because we have to provide the CIDR mask. If you put the /32, which means the single IP address. So this will be the single IP address basically, right? Okay, so that's what I've done. Then I went to the Anypoint monitoring. So what I'm saying, I just put the internal, I just put a a private endpoint here. So just make sure whenever you want to monitor a private endpoint for public location, you don't use the internal. It doesn't work basically, right? You have to remove that internal and you can use this basically. And I will add the other endpoint. I will just say, let me check. I have added employees, health. One, two, three, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Okay. Just say next and update monitor. So now what I'm doing, I am monitoring a private endpoint from the public location, right? So let me run it. So I will use the education location equals to US East 1, which means this is the public location, or US East 2. So I have allowed the public IP address for US East 1 location and US East 2 location in my VPC. So now it will run. It should run. It got passed. You can see it, right? It is passed. Let's see the details. Let me refresh this. Okay, public monitor. Let's see. Let's show all. So you can see all the endpoints, and you can see the endpoints of these are my private endpoints basically got monitor from the public location. So you can test your private endpoint also from the public location basically. It's possible, but you have to make the changes in your VPC. Like in case if you don't want to use the vCores, right, you can do that. But sometime like as I mentioned, right, uh, there might be some security concerns basically, because this particular IP address or this particular public location are the shared location basically, right? So when you are allowing this particular IP address, right, so this particular IP address might be using by other tenants of the MuleSoft basically, right? So that's it nothing will happen, but from security perspective, right, like I will in most of the case I will suggest to go with a private location if you want to monitor the private endpoint. But in case if you don't have a vCores and if you want to save the vCores, right, point to vCores, then you can simply simply use this particular approach where you can allow the IP address of the public location in your Anypoint virtual private cloud, right? So yeah, so let me show like or so what we have done till now. So we have learned like how to monitor public endpoints using public location, how to monitor a private endpoint using the private location, and how to monitor the private endpoint using the public location basically. So any question on this?
Nope.
Hello.
All good. You hear me?
Oh, good. Yeah, okay. So and apart from that, like if you want to see like manage locations, basically what are the different location? So these are the default location. Under this location, I have these two monitors. Under this location, I don't have a monitors basically. Then we have a private location. So I've just now created one of the private location, this one. So you can see it here basically, right? And you can modify, you can delete, you can disable, whatever you want to do. You can definitely do that basically, right? So apart from that, you can just see what are the failed what are the pass, or what are the pending execution. So there are a lot of things. It supports some kind of a batch script also. If you don't want to configure your monitors from here, right, if you want to use some you create a batch script and load if you want to load the monitor, you can just say upload and you can choose the file. So there's the format given on the MuleSoft documentation. Let me show there is a very good documentation given on the MuleSoft. So basically, how to configure the functional monitoring, because I took this particular pictures from there only. So you can see everything is there on the documentation. So you can use the bed CLI, right? So for like either you can use the Anypoint monitoring UI, which I have just shown in the demonstration part, or you can use the bed UI to create the monitors basically, right? So it's given everything here. So basically, like you can see it here, like what are things available basically, average response time, what are the things executed like last 1 hour, 2 hours, 3 hours basically, what are the different schedulers, those kind of thing. And it will show what are the things it shows, everything is mentioned here. So it's a very good documentation, you can go through that basically. So it like what are the different testing it does, black box, white box, it also tests private APIs, public APIs, those kind of things. So here we have a, like, bed CLI basically, so you can just in documentation it's given everything, like, how to write use BDD, so basically BDD, so you can write the test cases, you can create monitor using bed CLI, you can write the test cases using this BDD, so there are, you can make use of data weave expression, and you can use this BDD library and assertion library, and you can upload that to the anypoint monitoring basically. So there is a two-way. If you want to do automated, you can use this bed CLI, and either you can use the GUI also, right? So it's, everything is given on the documentation side. And also, if you see monitoring the endpoints public APIs, it is also given here. So I picked this diagram from here only, and here you can see the IP addresses. Here there is some, like, you make the test case using this so basically, like, you need to select the http.private port or https.private port, right? It depend on depend where is your private application or private endpoint is running. For me, the private endpoint is running on http.private port 8091. That's why I've configured that basically. Yeah. So Alex, I think I have covered everything what is in the Anypoint functional monitoring.
Awesome. I don't see any more questions. So I guess that's pretty much it. That was great. Thank you so much, Jackie.
Thank you. No problem.
All right. So for everyone watching, remember to follow us on twitch.tv/MuleSoft_community so you can receive notifications as soon as we are live, see all of our previous recordings, and also see our schedule in your time zone, which is pretty neat. All right. That's all then. Thank you so much, Jackie. I will see you
Thanks.
later.
Thank you. Bye bye. Have a nice day, everyone. Bye bye.
Bye.